Hello and welcome to the Maryland PTAC podcast, Assist and Win, where we showcase client success stories and feature procurement experts to help small business owners. I'm your host, Yasmin Razak, and I'm the Marketing and Training Coordinator here at the PTAC. Today's guest is Mr. John Graham, who is the Managing Director of Sullivan Cove Consultants, LLC, which is a multidisciplinary professional services firm practicing in the federal and commercial sectors. John has been a Maryland PTAC client since 2003 and has been successful in winning many large federal contracts. Thank you for joining us today, John.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Yasmin. It's a pleasure meeting you. I know a couple of your colleagues there, so I'm honored to be included.
Well, we are very happy to have you, particularly as you've been with the PTAC on and off for so long. You're probably one of our longest served clients. So it's a pleasure to hear that you're still getting value from us. So thank you again. Congratulations for being one of our oldest clients. And I'd like to start off by asking you how you found out about the PTAC way back in 2003.
I believe that PTAC was recommended to us, not just from one source, but from several sources. If you need to go to a place that will be a multi-source help in not only doing procurement work, but by helping to identify where it might be valuable to seek employment, to seek procurements. And I will say that the experience that we've had has been uniformly exceptional, and we really feel a debt of gratitude to you folks. You all were around when we were born, and we're still around nearly 20 years later.
Well, that's great. We're glad that you stuck by us, and we're glad that your business is still thriving. So talking about your business, could you tell us a little bit about your career background, what you were doing before you set up your business and why you decided to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I'm a lawyer, and I practiced law for more than 20 years in the private sector with big firms, a couple of AmLaw 100 firms that have more than 1,000 lawyers, and with small firms as well. And I decided 2002, 2003 that I wanted to test the water in the government contracting market. And the firm I was with at the time really wasn't interested in that. So I sort of took off on my own, formed an LLC. It was and still is an LLC, but in fact, at that point, it was a one-person LLC, and I was the one person. We started off, Yasmin, just offering our services as lawyers to government agencies and discovered that the market was not as large for just lawyers as we had hoped. So our process over nearly 20 years, I call it expanding the perimeter of the area of capability that we're seeking contracts in.
Okay, that's great. So what is Sullivan Cove Consultants, and who do you help exactly? What type of projects do you work on?
Sullivan Cove is, we now have, with our two biggest contracts, we have about 150 people working for us. Of that, our direct employees are 57, I think. And we have employees all across the country. I'll mention some of the larger contracts that we do, but we have grown, and we've grown fairly substantially in the last 5 years. We are not doing just legal work. We do project management principally, and the main area that we do is law enforcement. Our biggest contract, and I think I mentioned to you before we came on, we, between 2003 and 2013 or 14, had a fairly steady diet of work in the lower echelons of revenues. In 2014, the Department of Justice re-advertised a very large contract, and it was an IDIQ, indefinite duration, indefinite quantity. And we were approached again by a partner that we'd worked with before, because the IDIQ was structured as a small business contract. And so the incumbent was no longer a small business. We ended up becoming the prime contractor for the incumbent, who's our sub. And the IDIQ had 6 awardees, and once the award was made, you had to propose and bid the task orders. And we proposed and bid the task orders, and we were awarded the 2 largest task orders.
Okay, which brings me to my next question, which is, I know you've won a lot of contracts over the year, like 30 or 40. Would you mind sharing with us what the value of the largest contract you've ever won is?
The largest contract we won was the Department of Justice. It's called the APHIS contract, which is the Asset Forfeiture Legal Services contract. And the award was for the total value of all the task orders, and we did not get all the task orders. But the award was for $617 million.
Wow, that's a nice number. Wonderful. It's great hearing about the successes that you've had, but I'm sure you've had some career challenges along the way. Could you talk about how you've overcome career challenges that you faced?
Well, I will tell you that the good news comes with an equal portion of bad news or hard news. When we got our first task order under the Department of Justice contract, our revenues increased by tenfold in a month. That's the good news. The bad news is our expenses increased by more than tenfold in a month, and no bank would fund us. So to perform the contract, we had to find a source of funding to take care of, because we added a whole bunch of people on as employees for that time. And we had to do the package for employee benefits and all of that, and we had to pay them. And the unfortunate thing about government contracts is that you get a contract, it's probably going to be between 2 and 3 months before the revenue starts coming in. The expenses start immediately and the revenue follows behind. So we had a real challenge to fund the upfront costs of what was a great contract. And frankly, no bank that we went to was going to lend us the money.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, definitely cash flow is an issue for being a business owner. And so how did you figure your way out of that corner?
We found a company that specialized just in government contracts. They, in fact, were and are what we call a factoring company. And so we had to assign the proceeds from our contracts directly to them and then coming through to us. That saved us.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that they were able to bail you out in your hour of need. I know you've worked with a couple of our PTAC counsellors, namely Mary Lee Kolich, who is now retired, and currently with Arthenia LaFleur. How has working with your PTAC counsellor guided you in your contracting journey?
Well, I would say that the counselors that we've worked with are extraordinarily knowledgeable, give great advice, and are unselfish. And that is that the PTAC is a wonderful first source, but for companies like us, there are other sources of communication, other sources of advice. For instance, we're a disabled veteran firm. The PTAC works with veterans and disabled veterans, but there are other organizations that have been very, very beneficial to us. We're also a minority firm, and we're now in Severna Park, which is a suburb, basically, of Annapolis, but we were in downtown Baltimore. And so I viewed the folks at PTAC to be a primary source of information that led to other sources of information. If I have a thought on this, it's impossible to have too many people advising you, too many sources of advice, and we ought to seek any of them out.
Now that's great. I'm glad to hear that you've had a good experience with us. And in particular, you are a service disabled veteran-owned small business, and Arthenia is a VA certified counsellor. So what has that meant in terms of having somebody who's especially trained in working with veteran-owned businesses been like?
Jasmine, that is precisely the thing that brought me back to Arthenia this time, and it's her certification by CVE. We are a single member LLC. I'm the only member of that, but I have just issued option agreements on some of my shares to our key employees. Under the rules of the CVE and the VA, you have to report. They have to make sure that I retain at least 51% of the equity. And so they count the options, or supposedly count the options, as if they'd been issued, to make sure that I haven't given away more than 49%. I called up CVE because we'd issued the options, and I wanted to find out who we reported it to and where I sent them. And I got some advice from the VA that was contrary to what I thought was the right answer. So I asked the VA if they'd give that to me in writing, and they wouldn't. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? And they said, you need to go to the certified counselors. And that's how I got to Arthenia, who has now picked up the ball and is getting that question answered for us.
That's great. I'm glad that she's able to help you. And so just for businesses in general, why would you recommend that they come to the PTAC for help with contracting?
I had a couple of reasons. I practiced law for a while, and a legal relationship with the client is totally at will. I think a wonderful thing about government contracting is if you get an award, you've actually got a contract. Now, people talk about 2-year contracts and 5-year contracts, and in my experience, there's no such thing. But the usual contract awards that we've gotten have a base year and 4 option years, and unless you screw up badly, you're going to get your options exercised and be okay. So I think that's an important thing for government contracting. The other important thing is something that all of us care about, and that is Uncle Sam always pays his bills, and he pays it promptly. And if you happen to be a small business, the OMB said that small businesses are supposed to be paid within 15 days of submitting an invoice. My cohorts in the private sector are astounded when I tell them that our outstanding aged accounts receivable are less than 15 days.
Okay, great. Now, what did you assume government contracting would be like versus how it actually is?
I assumed that it would be less competitive than it actually is. I think it's and I think government contracting is becoming more and more competitive. What that means to me, to us, is identifying our differentiators from our competitors and seeking procurements that are favorable to our differentiators. Now, I'll say one of the most important things that we've had in the government contracting field is one of the most difficult to get. And that is that we have a top secret facility clearance, and most of the contracts that we bid and operate are, we call it in the cleared space. And the TS clearances, particularly the TS, but even secrets or confidentials, are tough to get. But if you get them, it really narrows the field of competitors.
What words of wisdom or advice do you have for other businesses who are trying to get into the government contracting space?
I have several pieces of advice, and I come off of them as what has benefited us. And the first is to seek as much advice from people that are doing it or counseling as you possibly can. There's no inventing the wheel. The wheel's already there. You ought to know, you ought to, we seek to know who else has a wheel and how it works. Secondly, I think that almost all of our contracts we've done in partnership with other firms, particularly small firms. And so partnership, in my view, is the way to go. And how do you do partnerships? You get out of your office. I don't know what we do with COVID-19 now, but you get out of your office and meet other people. You go to associations that you do. You go to industry days, and just do what comes naturally, and that is to talk to people that you share an interest with. I had a partner back when I was working in the private sector that relayed to me what she called the 50-48 rule. And that is that 50% of your new business comes from people that you've been with in the last 48 hours. And that is, I think, the best advice that I could give. Not only is it good for business, but it's just more fun to be with people, particularly people that you share an interest with.
Okay, and finally, John, how can we find out more information about Sullivan Cove Consultants?
We have a website. So if you want to go to www.Sullivan Cove, we run the two words together, SULLIVANCOVE.com. That's what we look like.
Thank you for spending time with us today, John, and we wish you continued good luck and success with your business.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was nice to meet you, and I look forward to seeing Arthenia again very shortly, I hope.